much for coming. We really appreciate it. We're really excited about this movie. We've spent about 5 years making it, and it's been a real sort of labor of love. And we've got some special people in the audience tonight. Jenny, Daniel's wife, came out, and so she's here. In the back, Tim Lewis is here as well. So. And we just wanted to thank the festival so much for including this film. We're really, really excited to be here. I guess we'll just open it up for questions.
I was really struck by I think it was the Eugene chief who spoke about, let me prosecute arson as opposed to terrorism. I was just wondering, and then the attorney at the end seemed to voice kind of a similar thought. I was just wondering how widespread that view is in the law enforcement people you talk to in making this film.
So the question was, the police captain says that he kind of just wants to prosecute arson rather than terrorism. That's simpler for him. And then he pointed out also at the end the prosecutor seems to have kind of mixed emotions about the prosecution, and he wondered how widespread that is. I would say that it is somewhat widespread, but not entirely. And the truth is, I mean, the prosecutor, as much as he felt somewhat conflicted, he prosecuted very hard, I mean, and argued for the terrorism enhancement. So I don't think that they think that these guys should be let off, or that they feel that their actions were somehow justified. I think that the main point that he was making at the end was just that people are complicated, and there are lots of different things that lead people to do what they do, and that people change after they make decisions. And so I think his view was not excusing the ELF at all, but it was just saying that it's complicated. And I think that was one of the big goals that Sam and I, really kind of wanted the movie to capture was, as we discovered this story, the more we dug, the more complicated and the more nuanced it became. And people who, opinions we thought would be kind of radical on one side or the other, actually were much more reasoned and different, but reasoned than we had imagined. And so that was kind of our goal, was to take the audience on that same journey that I think the prosecutor felt. How is Daniel doing? So he's in prison now. He actually, the Center for Constitutional Rights filed a lawsuit against the government for placing him and other people in the communications management unit, the sort of terrorist prison where they placed him. And soon after that suit hasn't been resolved, but soon after they filed the suit, he was moved out of that prison, out of that wing, and into the general population of the prison. And so I think he's doing okay. He is frustrated. Isn't happy to be there at all. But I think he's happy not to be in the CMU right now. So.
Could you speak more to your motivations and hopes for the film? Like, do you see this as art, journalism, activism, or some combination?
What is this movie? Is it art? Is it journalism? Is it activism? I mean, I think everybody who worked on the project has somewhat different views on that. My feeling is that it is all of those things. We thought we took journalistic standards very seriously as we were making the film. We don't edit people out of context, and we don't distort what people mean and that sort of thing. It is also art. I mean, it's a story that compresses time and has a narrative thread. And I think it's activism, but I don't think it's it's not a polemical film. We honestly, I think, believe that these issues are very complicated, and that you know, questions of what is the appropriate line for an activist to stand on, whether there's any sort of law breaking that's appropriate, is there any, you know, those are really interesting and important issues for everybody to sort of tangle with themselves. What is the response of government? What is effective? What sort of responses radicalize people? There are lots and lots of elements to it, and we hope that people will watch the film, talk about the film, argue about the film, and, you know, hopefully, when I was in college, I studied religion, and you know, kind of wanted to figure out if there was God, and wanted to figure out how I should live my life. And when I graduated, somebody said to me, you know, I'm still confused, but just at a higher level. And I think that's sort of what our goal is with this movie. Is we're not trying to answer the questions for you, but we want the conversation to be at a higher level than it often is when people are just sort of yelling at each other on television.
I think the only thing to add really is that while there is that sort of confusion and the back and forth and the uncertainty about where audiences will stand and in some cases where we stand on stuff, I don't think we want the film to be some sort of vehicle for any further apathy. There are intense issues at stake in our country and our society right now, and it should not be ignored. And so hopefully people will watch this film and question in themselves where they stand and where they will direct their own passions.
Why did it take such a long time, 5 years, to make this? And how did you sustain financing throughout this period?
Well, I think there's a lot of answers to that question. The first is just when we went and shot the film, when it sort of presented itself to us, we had to shoot it, and we did not have money at that time. And over the course of time in shooting it, the reason why it took so long, one of them certainly was gaining access to all the different voices that are in this film. There's many different perspectives, and it took a long time to gain people's trust and to gain the kind of quality conversations that we wanted to have. And then fundraising, I think, took a long time. I mean, I think that was really the main reason. And the third one is we had a ton of footage in the end. We had hundreds of hours, and that's a challenge for most documentaries, but this one, I think, in particular, was challenging, and it took a long time to edit because we had a lot of ideas, and it took a long time to find the rhythm, and when it did come together, you know, we see the film we have today, but there was some soul searching.
Based upon what I know about ELF, these characters that were constituted in the movie seem like relatively minor players. Is there a reason that you focused on these people rather than some of the more major activists within the ELF?
Sure. I mean, the reason we focused on Daniel was because my wife runs a domestic violence organization where he was working when the FBI came in and arrested him. And so that was, you know, she came home from work and said, guess what happened at work today? And I thought, well, Sam and I thought, wow, that's interesting. And I had known Daniel a little bit just from sort of knowing him around her office and that sort of thing. And he was not the type of person who I would have imagined if you said, imagine an eco-terrorist. And so that was interesting to me, and I thought, wow, here's this guy who had this whole secret backstory and had, you know, had grown up in Rockaway, Queens, and his dad's a cop, and he's a business major in college. How did this happen? So, you know, that was the question, I think, that drove us and drew us into this story more than a comprehensive analysis of the largest players in the ELF. That said, you know, Jake Ferguson was responsible for the first ELF action in the United States, and you know, was involved in 14 arsons. So, so I guess that's the answer.
Did you have a problem getting people to talk candidly about the history when they're facing these long prison sentences? That I guess seem to be resistant to wanting to document what they've done.
Did we have a problem getting access? We did, and frustratingly, we had problems on neither side trusted us. You know, the activists thought, who are these, you know, guys from New York City coming out to make another piece that's going to call us eco-terrorists? That was, you know, that was what the media was portraying them as. And similarly, you know, the Steve Swanson, the owner of the timber mill, or the prosecutor, or the detective, they didn't want to have some activists, filmmakers come in and sandbag them and make them look bad. And so, you know, we spent a lot of time explaining to them what we were doing, and spent a lot of time, you know, doing these interviews, and it was really, really important to us not to have straw men that were just kind of set up to knock down. We really thought that the different points of view were powerful and interesting, and even where we disagreed with them, we thought that they deserved a hearing, a respectful hearing. And I think we sort of feel like the most interesting documentaries are the ones that allow strong points of view to bang up against each other and kind of fight it out on the screen, and instead of us sort of imposing some, you know, heavy-handed point of view on that. So,
Do you plan national distribution of this to the East Coast particularly?
what is our distribution plan? So PBS and the BBC both funded the movie, so it will be broadcast on PBS's documentary series POV, and it will also be on BBC's Storyville series as well. And we are sort of trying to figure out what we'll be doing about theatrical run, but yes, we will definitely be taking it out into hopefully lots of markets around the country. Just one other thank you that just popped into my head. Paul Shu, I think, is here, and he, there he is. He was a mixer and a sound designer and a great friend of this project and other projects. Thank you.
What about old growth forests? Are they still being cut?
Are old growth forests still being cut? They are, and clear cuts are still happening. You know, it was interesting. We would go out and talk to people, and they would say, you know, clear cuts. You're not allowed to clear cut anymore. And then we get in a car, and somebody would take us up to a hill and sort of wave his hand. And you know, I can't. I'm not an expert in forestry, so I can't say how it is that what appears to me to be a clear cut isn't considered a clear cut. But yes, old growth trees are being cut, though at a much less rate than they were in the 90s, definitely. But a couple of shots that are in the movie, you know, those aerial shots, and there are a couple of huge logging shots that were shot, you know, in the last year.
Do you know what Jake Ferguson is doing now?
What is Jake Ferguson doing? He lives, you know, in the Eugene area, and is, you know, has a job and just living his life.
We just wondered about the lumber mill owner that, you know, had his place burned down. Did he kind of explain the film? Like, did he have any sort of thoughts about the reasonings behind why they did that? Did he change his own view a little bit about, you know, what he was doing?
I don't think so, no. The question was, did the owner of the lumber mill change his views as he sort of learned more about it? I don't think so. I think the one view that he did say that he felt differently was when he went to Suzanne Savoy's sentencing hearing, and he heard her talk, and he talked about what had happened, and he said he was surprised to see her, and you know, at the time that she was arrested, she was working with disabled children, and you know, was basically what most people would say was a good person, aside from having participated in this very serious crime. And so I think he was surprised to some extent to see that, but I don't think, I mean, he does not think that cutting down forests is a problem. He's, you know, he would point out that everybody in this room uses paper and wood in our houses, and where do you think that comes from? And and he feels like forests are replanted and regenerated, and it's been something that's been going on for generations in his family and will continue to go on. So I would say his view of the ELF may have changed a tiny bit, but his view of timber work, I think, probably changed not at all. 2 more questions.
I wanted to say how great you looked in that wedding dress. And that was nice that they let us into their lives that way too, because that was an important part of how you were building that story. But I was really interested in how you use that rotoscoping for the dramatizations of the, the parts that we're seeing sort of acted out. And I was wondering what made you decide to use that technique and to use black and white for those techniques. It was really a cool way of sort of setting it aside as a recreation.
The question was about the sort of black and white recreation animations that you see, where you're seeing the fires or the actions being done. I mean, those came really from, I think, a desire to show what it was that we were talking about, and also to kind of get inside people's heads and get a sense of the tension and the drama that was behind some of these actions.
I think aesthetically, also, I think the black and white was helpful to us, and maybe it's an esoteric reason, but I think it perhaps evokes the whole black and white feelings that a lot of people felt around the arsons and that sort of stuff, and being able to show it in black and white maybe evokes that, but it also just sort of separates it visually from everything else, and that was important, clearly, because we obviously were not filming the arsons.
Do you feel that when people need to protest something for social change after making this whole film, that radical actions are more effective in the long term, or again, just the whole writing letters and peaceful protests, which one is more effective in the long run?
It's a tough question. I mean,
I think it's a super complicated question, and the truth is, we made a 90-minute movie to explore that question, and so for us to try to boil it down to a 10-second answer would kind of undercut the point of the movie, which is that it's complicated and that different people have to have find different places for themselves. But I think what Sam said is true, though. Action, activism is important, but I think thinking through the consequences, both the ethical and effective, questioning the ethics and effectiveness of those actions is also extremely important. So thank you again, everybody, for coming. We really appreciate it.